Have you ever walked into a room full of strangers and felt your personality just evaporate? Like someone hit a kill switch on your ability to be a normal human being? I'm talking about that moment when your brain goes from functional adult to complete static. You're standing there with a drink you're not even thirsty for, and suddenly you forget how arms work. Oh Lord, it is good to be here with you. Welcome to the Confident Connection Lab, where we figure out why we're so spectacularly bad at the things that should be easy. Let me tell you about the worst networking event of my life. It was 3 years ago, one of those startup mixer things, where everyone's pretending their side hustle is about to be the next big thing. I walked in with what I thought was a solid game plan. Be interesting, be memorable, make connections. The usual delusional confidence. I spotted this group near the snack table, laughing about something. They seemed cool, approachable. So I did what every advice article tells you to do. I walked up and tried to contribute to the conversation, except I had no idea what they were talking about. So I just sort of hovered. You know that hover? Where you're close enough that you're technically part of the circle, but far enough that everyone knows you don't belong there yet. The silence that followed was so thick I could feel it pressing against my chest. One woman glanced at me, did that polite smile thing, and then immediately looked away. And here's the thing, I panicked. Instead of asking a simple question like a normal person, I launched into this bizarre monologue about how I just read this fascinating article about the psychology of first impressions. I was trying so hard to sound intelligent that I sounded like a malfunctioning TED Talk. If that story made you physically cringe because you've been there too, hit the like button right now. Seriously. It helps the algorithm know we're building something real here at the Confident Connection Lab. And it tells me I'm not alone in having been that person at the party. Here's what I wish someone had told me at that networking event. Nobody in that room was looking for someone impressive. They were all looking for someone real, someone they could relax around, someone who made the whole performance of networking feel less exhausting. Psychologists have a name for what happens in our brains during these moments. It's called impression management anxiety, and it's essentially your brain running a million calculations at once, trying to figure out how to be accepted while simultaneously monitoring everything you say for potential mistakes. You're not really present in the conversation. You're in your head, editing yourself in real time. But here's the twist nobody tells you. The fastest way to build trust in a new group isn't to hide your nervousness or pretend you're cooler than you are. It's actually the opposite. It's what I call the confession opener. And it works because it short-circuits the entire social performance we all expect. Listen closely to this distinction, because it's critical. There's a difference between dumping your trauma on strangers and being strategically vulnerable. The confession opener isn't about oversharing. It's about acknowledging the awkwardness that everyone else is also feeling, but pretending they're not. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in practice. Imagine walking up to that same group at the networking event, but instead of hovering or launching into some desperate display of intelligence, you say something like, "Hey, I'm going to be honest. I'm terrible at these things, and I just kind of froze up looking for someone to talk to. Mind if I join you guys?" That sentence does something remarkable. It takes the social mask off first before anyone expects it. It says, "I'm human, I'm uncertain, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise." And here's the beautiful part. It gives everyone else in that group permission to drop their mask too. Research from social psychology shows that vulnerability creates what's called the pratfall effect. When competent people make small mistakes or admit weaknesses, others actually like them more, not less. But this only works if the vulnerability is genuine and contextual. You can't just walk around trauma dumping and expect people to trust you. The reason the confession opener works so well in new groups is because it addresses the elephant in the room. The fact that everyone's kind of uncomfortable in performing without making it weird. You're not asking them to validate you or comfort you. You're just stating a fact and moving forward. I want you to think about the last time someone was genuinely honest with you about feeling awkward in a social situation. Take a second. Did you judge them for it? Or did you kind of respect them for saying what everyone was thinking? That's the shift we need to make. We've been taught that confidence means hiding uncertainty, but real confidence is being okay with other people seeing your uncertainty. It's the difference between armor and skin. Armor keeps you safe but isolated. Skin lets you actually connect. Here's what I wish someone had told me at that networking event. Nobody in that room was looking for someone impressive. They were all looking for someone real, someone they could relax around, someone who made the whole performance of networking feel less exhausting. We talk about the mechanics of human connection every week here at the Confident Connection Lab. If you want to keep mastering this stuff with us, if you want to stop overthinking every social interaction and start actually enjoying them, make sure you're subscribed. We're building a community of people who are done with the fake version of confidence. So here's your homework, and I mean this in the most practical way possible. The next time you're entering a new group, whether it's a work meeting, a party, or just a conversation with people you don't know well, try the confession opener. Not in a self-deprecating way, but in a matter-of-fact way. Acknowledge something slightly vulnerable about the situation, and watch what happens to the energy in the room. You might say, "I'm going to need a second to remember everyone's names, fair warning." Or, "I almost didn't come tonight because I've been in my head all week, but I'm glad I did." Small, honest, human. Trust doesn't start with being perfect. It starts with being present. And you can't be present when you're busy performing. Okay, so you've made it past the initial terror of walking into a new group. You've used the confession opener, you've acknowledged the awkwardness, and people didn't run away screaming. Now what? This is where most of us screw it up. We think the hard part is over, so we either go silent and fade into the background, or we overcompensate and start talking way too much about ourselves. Both approaches are trust killers. Here's what I need you to understand. Trust isn't built in one big moment. It's not like you crack some perfect joke or share some profound insight, and suddenly everyone accepts you. Trust is built in stages, like a Stickman drawing. You start with the most basic structure, then you add details, one piece at a time, until you have something that actually looks human. I call this the Stickman Strategy, and it's based on something psychologists call progressive disclosure. It's the idea that relationships, any relationships, romantic, friendship, professional, develop through a specific sequence of increasingly personal exchanges. You can't skip steps. You can't go from zero to deep philosophical conversation without building the foundation first. Think of it like this. Imagine you're drawing a stickman on a whiteboard. You start with the circle for the head. That's your initial contact, your name, your reason for being there. Then you draw the vertical line for the body. That's the basic exchange of information, what you do, where you're from. Then the arms. That's shared opinions about neutral topics. Then the legs. That's where you start getting into preferences, values, slightly more personal territory. Each line you add makes the figure more complete, more real. But if you try to draw the hands before you've drawn the arms, or add facial features before you've established the head, the whole thing looks off. People sense when you're skipping steps in the trust-building process, even if they can't articulate why it feels wrong. Let me give you the exact sequence that works, because I've tested this dozens of times, and it's shockingly consistent. This is your roadmap for going from stranger to trusted person in a new group. Step 1 is what I call the stupid question gambit. After your initial opener, you ask something incredibly basic about the situation you're all in together. Not a clever question, not an impressive question. A genuinely simple one that shows you're not trying to dominate the conversation. At that networking event I told you about earlier, after bombing with my pseudo-intellectual nonsense, I eventually learned to ask things like, "How did you all end up at this thing?" Or, "Has anyone actually tried the food?" Or, "Is it as sad as it looks?" These questions work because they're non-threatening, and they give people an easy entry point to contribute. The key here is that you're not asking to gather intelligence or prove you're interesting. You're asking because you're genuinely curious about the answer, and you're giving other people a chance to talk without pressure. You're drawing that first circle, establishing that you're someone who listens. Step 2 is the echo and expand technique. Someone answers your question, And instead of immediately jumping in with your own story, you repeat back something they said and ask them to tell you more. This sounds stupidly simple, but we almost never do it because we're too busy thinking about what we want to say next. So if someone says they came to the event because their friend dragged them, you say, "Your friend dragged you? Are you the designated reluctant social person in your group? Or was this a special occasion?" You're taking their answer, acknowledging it, and inviting them deeper into the conversation. You're drawing the body of the stickman, showing that you're paying attention and that their thoughts matter. This is where the magic happens, because most people in new groups are so starved for genuine attention that when someone actually listens and follows up, they start to relax. They lean in. The performance drops a little bit. Step 3 is what I call the micro-confession exchange. Once the conversation has some momentum, you share something small and slightly vulnerable that relates to what they just said. Not your deepest trauma, but something that shows you're a real person with real experiences. If they mention being dragged to the event by a friend, you might say, "I feel that. I almost bailed on this 3 times today because I convinced myself everyone here would be more successful than me, and I'd feel like crap." You're drawing the arms now, extending yourself, showing that you trust them enough to admit something real. Here's what most people miss. You're not doing this to get sympathy. You're doing it to give them permission to be honest too. When you're slightly vulnerable, other people feel safe being vulnerable back. That's the reciprocity that builds actual connection. Step 4, and this is critical, is the value question. This is where you ask someone about something they clearly care about, something you've picked up from the conversation so far. You're not asking to be polite. You're asking because you've been listening and you want to understand their world better. Maybe they mentioned they're working on a project, or they lit up when talking about a hobby, or they made a comment that revealed a strong opinion about something. You ask them about that thing, and you ask in a way that shows you respect their knowledge. You mentioned you're into urban planning. What's the thing about that field that most people completely misunderstand? This is where you're adding the legs to your stickman, giving the relationship stability. You're showing that you see them as someone with valuable perspectives, not just another face in the crowd. And here's the final piece that ties it all together. You have to genuinely care about their answers. I know that sounds obvious, but we tend to ask questions as a social tactic rather than from actual curiosity. People can feel the difference. If you're asking just to check a box, the trust doesn't build. If you're asking because you actually want to know, everything changes. We dig into these psychological tools every single week at the Confident Connection Lab. If you're tired of feeling like social situations are a test you keep failing, subscribe and join us. Drop a comment below and tell me about the last time you tried to connect with someone new. What worked? What crashed and burned? I read every single one because your experiences help me understand what we need to talk about next. So here's your practical application. The next time you're in a new group, visualize the stickman. Start with the head. Basic contact. Add the body, simple questions, and genuine listening. Draw the arms. Small vulnerability. Add the legs. Deeper questions about what matters to them. One line at a time. Trust isn't built by being impressive. It's built by being interested. And the fastest way to make someone trust you is to show them you actually give a damn about who they are.